Alrighty then, for today's video we are gonna talk a little bit about the currencies. What are they for? How do they work? Which ones are valuable? Which ones are usable? And which ones are not per se the most usable ones, or at least you'll only use them a little bit. Alright, so if we just start from one end and we'll move through it slowly. First and foremost, we have a scroll fragment. That is literally the most unimportant. It doesn't matter whatever that item is, not really anything that we need to talk about too much. You get five of those, you get five of those makes one scroll of wisdom. In the beginning, when you're starting out the game, you're level 1. Maybe this is a little useful because you'll need the scrolls to identify the next items. But really, to be fully honest, I use these to get my scrolls. I don't get them from my fragments. So we'll get to that once we come down here. Now, you have your scroll of town poles, equally important. You're going to be using that quite a bit. You're going to feel a little tight on scrolls in the beginning until you fully understand how that works, how to gain them really quickly and easily, how to trade them. And then you have the next is inkling orbs. Basically the way that works is you have a bottle. With the bottle we can then use an inkling orb that provided the white text, which is of course a rollable number, so it could, the perfect roll would be 70%, this rolled 66%, but it also have different types of mods it can roll. So there's a handful of mods that you can roll on here, different types. Then you have your instilling orb, which is basically the same idea but different outcomes. So it has different mods it can roll on here. Then we have our blacksmith whetstone, which is for weapons, to put quality on a weapon. You basically grab one of these, you press your weapon, depending on what item level it is, or like what type of item it is. If it's a high-end item, it'll take more of these. So in case of this, it's the highest tier item basically. It'll take 20 of these to get 20 quality. But if this was a level 1 weapon, if I was something I found when I walked out of town in level 1, it would probably only take one of these to get 20%. That's a new feature that it just changed. Usually it always took 20. Armor scrap, same idea, it just for an armor. You put it on an armor, any armor. Belts don't count, but any other piece of armor, so helmet, gloves, boots, or armor. That's it. That's basically fairly simple. Then we have our glass blowers bubbles, which is for our flasks as well. So you can put quality on the flask. Putting quality on the flask allows you to use the flask for longer than normal. So as you see, it lasts for 6.10 seconds. If I add one of these, now it's 6.20, 6.40, so on and so forth. If we go to skill gems here, grab one skill gem, yep. Next up is the gem cutter's prism, which is a way to put quality onto your gems. As you see, one gem cutters equal 1% quality on your gems. Of course, you're gonna want to add 20 quality on all of your gems if possible. That is just super convenient, more power. If you hold down your alt button on the item, you'll be able to see the specific effect the gem cutter's prism has, right? While channeling a support skill, take 0 to 2% less damage from hits. So once it's 20%, it'll automatically be 2% less. Next up, we have the transmutation orb, right? So there's, in my opinion, two uses for this. Either you upgrade a white item to a magic item or a blue item. This is one convenient way to use this currency for this specific league. It's super useful. But what I use them for even more so than upgrading a white item to a blue item is this is where I get my scrolls of wisdom from. So as you can see, 40 transmutation orbs turns in to 4 times as many scrolls of wisdom. So if I sell this, I then get 4 times scrolls of wisdom. And as you collect these a fuck ton, it's very easy to convert these into scrolls of wisdom, and then convert your scrolls of wisdom into scrolls of town portals. That way you're never running out of town portals or scrolls of wisdom. The way that works is you want to go to one of the act vendors, and if we go to an act vendor, they'll be selling.
Good tidings to you.
If you purchase, not you. That's the wrong
Made
guy.
any progress? No, I was never there.
As you see, it costs you 3 scrolls of wisdom for 1 scroll of town portal. So that way you can basically interchange your currencies like that and make them into others. Of course, you do not want to do that with all your currency. Just this one that's the only one I would do it with, or at least I would not do it in bulk with anything. If I'm like in super dire need of an alchemy, okay, of course I'll go and I have like an abundance of whatever the alchemy I need to buy the alchemy for. I'll of course do that to make like a map in the very early days when you're just starting mapping or something like that. Okay, so next up we have an annulment orb. I'm not currently holding one, but give me one. Just one. I don't have. Okay, that sucks. So I'll explain how this works. An annulment orb allows you to remove a random suffix or prefix from an item. Now, there's of course ways to force what you're choosing to remove, but that's for a crafting video. I'm just gonna explain what it actually does. So let's say we had one here, and I pressed that, and I went over here. It's basically a 50-50% chance if it's gonna remove the life or the fire res. So one press of this orb removes 1 suffix or 1 prefix. That's the use for it. Next up we have the Orb of Chance. So an Orb of Chance, basically what it will do is it'll upgrade any white item into a random rarity of the same item. So it can go magic, it can go rare, or it can go unique. We press it and it goes to a blue item or a magic item. And we can try again and see if it goes to a rare item. Boom, it becomes a rare item. Very simple, super useful in early games. Now, next up, we have, like this. We have exalted orbs. So just like the annulment orb removes a suffix or a prefix, or like this adds a prefix or a suffix. So if I were to use this here, I would gain either 1 suffix or 1 prefix. We can just do that right now. And if we then look here, boom, we got one prefix. So now the item has full prefixes and is missing 2 suffixes. So that's how the Exalted Orb works. Next up we have a Mirror of Calandra. Now I'm not gonna use this, of course, for the people who know, but if you're new to the game, this is basically the most valuable currency item there is. There's no other item in here in the currency tab that has the value that this has. Now the reason behind this item being as valuable as it is because you can use it on an item. So if you look at this item right here, you'll notice that I have an item right next to it that's the same item. If you look, like this eye jewel right next to it, there's another eye jewel. It's turned the opposite way. If you notice, one is looking to the left and one is looking to the right. This is the exact same item. If you look, everything on it is 100% the same. The numbers, the rolls, what mods, everything, the tiers on the mods, everything is the same. And the reason behind that is this item is mirrored. That means that any given item in the game can be mirrored, basically. Now, that just creates a duplicate of whatever item you are using your mirror on. Now, a very common way to understand currency in PoE is you have values. So there is chaos values and divine values. That's basically the 2 main sources of tradable currency, right? We have the currency exchange, and if we go here, you can see 1 annulment is 7 chaos. And if we then go to say, I want 1 divine is 212 chaos. Let's say that I have divines, but I wanted a Mirror of Calandra. You see how 1 Mirror of Calandra is 990 divine. And since 1 divine is 212 chaos, and after playing the game for a while, you're gonna understand how rare the divines actually are. Getting one of these is like next to impossible. That's how you should view it. This should not be an item that you should chase in your first season, because there ain't no, you might get lucky and drop it on the ground directly, but chances are slim to none. I have made this from collecting the mirror shards, and once you have 20 mirror shards, it becomes a full mirror. So basically all of these, this whole line of currency, except for the last 2 here, has what's called shards. Oh, well, this doesn't, but these have shards. So you collect shards, and enough of them, once you have enough of them, they create one of the other items. So transmutation shards turns into transmutation orbs. And there's specific ways to farm out these shards, called harbingers, which is a league mechanic, and I love to do those, so that's why you often see me having a lot of these shards and having a lot of the currency for those specific type of things. Alright, so next up we have the Regal Orb. The Regal Orb is a very useful orb, to be fully honest. It has, in my opinion, multiple uses. There's a couple of things. For instance, I'll show this one off first, because this is probably going to be technically the most useful thing, in my opinion, because it can be used for multiple situations. So let's say you are starting out. You have a fairly bad build. It doesn't have anything going for it. It's super bad. You have like really low tier items, or maybe you're playing on hardcore and you do not want to run the risk of dying to some crazy mods or whatever the fuck. This is a really good item to use. So the way it works is it'll upgrade any magic item to a rare item. So basically we go from blue to yellow, right? In rarity. It also of course adds a modifier to the item when you upgrade it. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind. Now how this can work in your benefit. And one thing that I personally use it for is when I'm starting out, and if I don't want to fight something that's super tough when it comes to maps, you have a blue map that has one modifier and you regal it, it becomes a rare map, but it only has 2 modifiers. Now if you needed to complete this, sometimes when you're doing your atlas, this needs to be corrupted, and then I would corrupt it and hope that it wouldn't add anything. So now basically this is like the easiest red corrupted T16 map you'll ever find out there, technically, right? Well, the mods are a little crazy, but if you understand how to do your atlas and stuff, this makes a lot of sense, right? So this is just a very easy way to complete things without having to deal with like super hard mods or something that's completely outrageous or got like just a stupid amount of stuff going on, right? Very easy, very convenient, super easy to understand, very useful. Another thing I like to use it for a lot is doing jewels. So for instance, you have a blue jewel with the mods you like. When it's a cluster jewel, for instance, if I make this with 2 passives on it, it can only hold 2 passives, so I'm pretty happy with that. Everything else besides that would be an upgrade, so I use a regal on it and I get something else on it and it's an upgrade. That's another very smart way to use them. Let's go for the next one. Next one is Alx or Alchemy Orbs. These are also very essential. In the beginning, you're gonna want to use a lot of these, and they're gonna be a little bit hard to maintain right at the beginning, but it won't be a problem later down the line. The way this works is you can upgrade any white item into a rare item. So this is super convenient because it randomly just upgrades an item and gives you some random mods, and that way is useful. But the way most people use these per se is on your maps. So when you have a white map and you put an alchemy orb on it, it automatically makes the map rare, and making the map rare gives you more quantity, more rarity, map size, pack size, and different types of features. So that's one very useful choice for these alchemy orbs. Also, the upgrading the armor or any item is super useful. And okay, so next one is chaos orbs, and how that works is it re-rolls any yellow item into another yellow item, but with different modifiers. So for instance, if I were to use it on this one, it would probably change the mana, the lightning, and the life and the intelligence to something else. The place I feel like these are most useful is again on your maps. So let's say I had been on my lightning strike build and I wanted to do this map. I need to be able to leech from a monster in order to stay alive. So if I cannot leech, I die. So this map would be impossible for me to do because it says monsters cannot be leeched from. So if I use a chaos on it, then we change the mods, and now it says less recovery, and that's no problem for me because I'm leeching. I'm not recovering anything, I'm leeching. So that's perfect. And now we can do the map, and that's basically how that currency works. So that's one way to use it. What it's used for more so than that, in my opinion, is buying and selling items. So you can see this one, I have this one for sale right now for 20 chaos. So that's a very common way to use your chaos orbs, is basically to buy an item you want, or to liquidate an item and turn it into Chaos Orbs. So you could liquidate a divine and turn it into Chaos Orbs, and then use the Chaos Orbs to buy my essence, for instance. It's just simple feature. I know I haven't talked about the chisel, but I'm gonna come back to the chisel. But the only reason I haven't talked about this is because there's multiple of them, and I didn't want to mix it up. So we'll go to that. We'll talk about the chisels when we hit the next page. Then we have what's called a veiled orb. Now veiled orbs are super expensive. They are like 14, 15 divines right now. I think maybe even more. The way a veiled orb works is we have this lady right here that's called June, and she'll have this board with some bad guys that you can fight, and these bad guys drops an item that has a veiled mod on it. So basically, instead of the lightning resist, it would have this mod on there, but you can't really tell what it is. So you walk over to June, and then you can unveil the item. I'll show you exactly what I mean. If we go here, we can take this bottle, and as you see, there is one mod that's hidden, and it is like a weird texture, right? It's like not even language, it's like symbols that's moving. And it says off the veil. So if I were to use a veiled orb on an item, it would add a mod looking like that. Now the mods that you gain from veiled orbs are specific to June. So it's something that you technically, if you really want to use these mods, you have to unlock them every time you do a new league. You have to gain a bunch of these, unveil them, and as you unveil them, you can choose to learn these crafting recipes. And as you learn the crafting recipes, you can then craft them yourself onto another item. So when I then go to my crafting table and I put a bottle in here, now I can put the reflected mod on there, which I just unveiled. Oh, here, right? Yeah. So this, I just unveiled this well, I had it already, right? But technically, I unveiled that. So now I can use the reduced reflected damage taken during this effect. So as you learn all the veiled mods, you can then craft them onto an item. But the thing about veiled mods is they're usually, or not usually, they're always tier 1s. So as you see on this ring, it has +1 to minimum endurance charges. And that's basically attained from adding a veiled orb to this item. But the thing about the veiled orbs are, if I were to add it onto this item, it could consume one of the suffixes or one of the prefixes, or it could just add a prefix and not consume anything. But that's like, again, that's for a crafting video. It's not something I'm gonna go in deep with here. It's just to explain what it kind of is. All right, so let's get to the next one. The next one would be your augmentation orb. If we go back here and we make this blue, and this has 1 suffix. Now, if we have a blue item, it only has 1 prefix, or it has 1 suffix, like this one. We can then use our augmentation orb to, in this case, we'll add a prefix. If it had a prefix, it would add a suffix. So, boom, we get a second mod onto a rare, or a magic item, or a blue item, whatever you want to call them. Next up would be Divine. Divines, I'm not gonna use these. This is basically trade currency in most cases. You can also use 1 orb on any given item. What that will do is it will re-roll the item, or it will remold the item's modifier. So not into a new modifier, but just to a new role. So the way I can explain how this works. If we look at my armor, it currently has 48 dexterity. Now the roll for dexterity, as you can see, it says 43 to 50. So the highest roll of dexterity I can get on this armor right now is 50. I could then take a divine orb, use it on this armor, and it would change the rolls on the dexterity. It's not a guarantee that it could change the rolls on the suppression, it could change the rolls on life, it could change the rolls on any one of these items or mods. But you can keep pushing the divine into them until you get to a point where all of your mods is 100% perfect. As you can see, mine are not 100% perfect. I'm missing 2% evasion and energy shield on one of the prefixes, and I'm missing 2 dexterity on my suffix, and the rest of them all perfect rolls. So it's for the max energy mana is 30, 25. That's the maximum roll it can be, right? 110 for the evasion energy shield, 22 for the spell suppression, 15 for the lightning cast. So you see how they are all perfect, but the dexterity and the stun evasion is not perfect. But I could technically keep pouring divines into it until it's perfect. It's not worth it to me though. This is close enough to perfect to where I don't care. Like, I don't need 2 dex, and I don't need 2% more ES evasion. Doesn't matter. In certain situations, it kind of do matter, because you want to hit a specific threshold for the build to like not take damage or not whatever. In my case, I'm pretty happy where I'm at now. I spent like 10 divines on rolling this or something like that. That's fine. It's all good. It's nearly perfect. That's good enough for me. The main thing you're going to use divines for is by far buying items. Selling the higher end items will be sold mostly for divines, as you'll see. 10 divines for that, 1 divine for that, 6 divines for that. It's just very convenient to use the divines as a buy and sell featuring currency, right? More so than using it on an item. I wouldn't really use it on an item unless you have like an abundance of divines that you don't need. If you have an abundance, sure, go crazy. And so, as you see, I currently aren't holding any of these 3. I'm not gonna buy them. I will explain how they work, but I'm not gonna buy them. Hina Chorus Lock, right? So the Hina Chorus Lock, always read the items, of course. That is the easiest way to understand stuff. And if you don't understand, look it up. It's just how it works. Like, that is like the number one way to understand how these items works. But basically, what happens when you use a Hina Chorus Lock on any given item is you can foresee the result of the next currency item you choose to use on it. So to explain this in a different way, if we were to upgrade this item with the Regal into a rare, so it goes from blue to yellow or from magic to rare, right? If I used a Hina Chorus Lock first, if I had a Hina Chorus Lock here, right, and I then went and pressed the Hina Chorus Lock and we pressed on it, it would make a little symbol that's like pink, and then if I then go to press my Regal Orb to upgrade it, before I press upgrade on the armor and change it into the rare version, it'll show me the rare version, what it'll turn into, what mods it'll have, the rolls on the mods, everything. It'll show me what happens if I press the button and turn this into a rare item. Let's say I really liked what it turned into when I looked at the Hina Chorus Locked it, and then I regaled it because it was just awesome. It was exactly what I wanted. I needed the 45 intelligence, the 69 life, and the 12 color res. That was the absolute perfect roll. Then I would press it, right? But maybe the role was not what I wanted, right? Maybe it turned into mana and fire res or some other shit that I didn't need. And then I would be like, oh, okay, so maybe I don't want to use this. Maybe I want to use something different. And then you can basically just say, okay, maybe I want to Veil Orb it instead. And I hover with my Veil Orb over it. And I look at it and it shows me what the Veiled Orb is. I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. It gives me a prefix. I want a suffix. Okay, so I can always use this because this gives me 1 more % quality. I know that, so when the Hinokora's luck show me that it's gonna go for quality, I can use it, and then I can use another Hinokora's luck, boom, and we can go back to redoing the Regal to see is it worth it. Of course, you're not gonna do it with a Regal Orb. It would never be worth using a Hinokora's luck on adding a Regal Orb unless it's something absolutely out of this world crazy you're making. So it has to be like mirror to your items in order for that to be worth doing, right? Like it has to be something worth more than this because of how expensive these Hinekora locks actually is. And you'll see right here, 1 Hinekora lock is 227 divine, so it's basically more than a mage lock. That 1 lock costs more than this belt costs, and this belt is by a million times more useful if you're new to the game. So you're not gonna want to use these. You're gonna want to sell these because it's gonna take a while before the Hinekora lock feature is gonna be useful for you, right? So if you're a new person to the game, it's just not useful. It's a super useful item to find because you'll sell it and it'll make your whole build 100,000 times more like strong, right? Let's go with the next one here, the Jeweler's Orb. So the Jeweler's Orb works like this. Every item, as you can see here, is a part of my build, which is not a jewel or a belt or like an amulet, has a socketed, a socket where there's room for a skill gem, right? So if we look at this armor, it currently only has 1 socket. The maximum number of sockets you can have on armor is of course 6. So to maximize the power of your build, you of course want to have 6 sockets on your armor. And with the jewelers, you get to re-roll, but as you can see, it can go up and down, up and down. It can be completely different in colors, in links, in everything, every time I press it. So that really is super random. Now there's a couple of ways to go about this, right? So you can just freestyle it and hope you hit a 6 socketed item, or we can go right over here. And then you have something called an omen of jewelers, which ensures the next jeweler's orb you use is gonna give you the maximum amount of sockets. So for instance, with the armor here, the 6 is the maximum amount of sockets it can have. So if I had a I don't have an Omen of Jewelers, but let's say I did have an Omen of Jewelers sitting right here in my inventory. I would be able to press this and just press it once, and boom, that would have made it 6 socketed right then and there, and this would disappear out of my inventory. Of course, it would be gone. But that's basically how the jewelers work. It also has its own recipe. So you can go to your crafting table. You can then go put your item in there. You can hit down here, and as you can see, you can get 2 sockets for 1 jewelers, or you can get 5 sockets for 70, or you can get 6 sockets for 350, and that's also doable with your linked items. Like you can link it in here, which we're gonna get to right in a second, and you can change the colors of your socketed spaces. Like they have different colors, right? Next one is for the links. So as you can see, there's a link between these 2, and then these 2, and these 2, and these 2, and these 2. So this is linked together. All 6 sockets is basically linked together. what happens when you link an item is if I have a gem in here, as you can see, these two are linked currently. These two aren't linked to anything. So if I were to put a skill gem inside of this and a support gem inside the other one, now these two are linked. And this support gem supports this gem if it's capable to, like, of course, if it's capable. It has to be compatible. If it's not non-compatible, it doesn't really matter. So if I put this in here and I go over here, right, and I look, I have a corrupting fever. All right, I gotta technically put it in here to fully see it. So if we look, it says corrupting fever as the number 3 on supported skills, and there's a red X upon it. The only one that has a green thing is the frostbolt. The frostbolt can be supported by this, right? The rest of them cannot. So basically that allows you to see exactly what can support any of your skill gems and what cannot. So when they are linked, if that was compatible with the one I was using, it would basically make the other skill gem more powerful. Now, to maximize the power, you want to use your fusing orb or orb of fusing. The way that works is, now you saw how it just linked the top two too. So now we have 2 links at the bottom and 2 links at the top. If we continue using these, at some point, now we have all 4 linked together. So basically the way that... Excuse me. So the way it works is I have these 4 linked now. So if I had a skill gem in here and 3 support gems, they would now all support the 1 skill gem. So that's why you want to kind of collect a bunch of these in the beginning to maximize your power. Now, each skill gem has a certain set of support gems that are most efficient for that skill gem or usable, and some that are that won't support it at all. But in some cases, if we look at my body armor, for instance, I'm using all blue gems except for 1 red gem, right? So I need all the sockets to be blue except for the 1 red. And if you look at this armor, it currently has 1 blue, 2 green, and 1 red. We can then change the color by using our chromatic orb. It allows us to change the color over and over and over until we hit exactly what we are looking for. Oh, we just rolled over the 3 blue, 1 red. That would have been the one I would have saved, right? You can also go down here, go all the way down here, and then we can choose to use our fusing orbs to link an item, or our chromatics to change the colors. And you could change the colors, as I said, into whatever you feel like is most useful for you.
Cheers.
What the fuck is happening? This Indian number is crazy. Alright, so next up is our... Well, they just added the stack decks. I'm not going to talk about the stack decks because it's super simple. You just open a stack deck and it turns into any one of the given cards that you can get. That's it. That's just all there is to it. It didn't used to have its own spot. Now it does. It's just super convenient. It got moved in here. Next up, Harbinger Orbs. So, Harbinger Orbs, the way a Harbinger Orb works is you can upgrade any given map. Take that. It's not going to work with a T16 map because you cannot upgrade a T16 into a T17. So it will not work if I go over here and push this one. It's just, it cannot apply that. The way it works, it upgrades a lower tiered map to 1 tier higher. The way I always, and I highly preference please do this to not waste anything. Only use it on T15 maps. Do not ever use it on T14, T1s, T5, whatever the fuck. Only T15. It's the only place it's worth it. You put it on a T15, it turns it automatically into a T16. It's that simple. So if we use this, boom, it became a T16 lighthouse. And like that's how you're gonna maintain. As you can see, I have 1,000 T16s, right? And I don't have nearly as many of any of the others. And that's basically how you're gonna sustain your T16 maps, and you're gonna keep being able to grind them. It's having stuff like the Harbinger Orbs, or selling your maps 3 to 1. So you can like sell. If I sell 3 of the same map to a vendor, like this, I will get a different map. Oh no. Make sure you you can't, of course you can't do that with a T15 map. I don't know why I tried to explain. It has to be anything less than a T16, right? So 3 T15 maps automatically turns into a T16 map. Three tier 1 maps will turn into a tier 2 map, and you can then continuously upgrade them like that. It's not always worth it though. Once you get to a certain spot, it's just not worth it anymore, pretty much. Unless you are like having a fucking like crazy amount of something, then of course, like, let's say you had 41 of something and you will never run it, and you don't want to sell them, you can just vendor a whole bunch and then get some other maps that you might want to run instead. Wait, get me back to my map and let me grab that. Now, for the next one, it's called a Orb of Horizons. The way a Orb of Horizon works is kind of like the Harbinger Orb. The Harbinger Orb upgrades and map 1 tier. There is a chance it can turn into a Harbinger map too. I'll explain that in just a second. But the Horizons only changes the map to a different map of the same tier. So as you see, we can just swap between all the tier 15 maps like that. So it's very convenient to complete your atlas. With the Harbinger Orb though, there is a possibility that you press a map and it turns in, it just randomly turns, and it can be any map, honestly. It can be a T1 map, I don't know if it can be a T1 map, but it can definitely be like a T10 map, and it turns into one of these. Basically, that's a completely random thing. It's super random, you never know. I've done a couple of hundred Harbinger Orbs, and I've not gotten that many Harbinger maps, so it's not too bad. They are doable, like easily doable, super easy to do. It's really not hard to do these maps. It's just if you are trying to complete your atlas, you really don't want to get that if you're trying to complete the atlas. But if you're not completing the atlas, you don't really care. You just stack them up, and at some point you can just run a bunch of them and then collect all the shit. Not super useful this specifically though. All right, so next one is the Fracturing Orb. I'm not gonna buy one, but I do have a stream where we are crafting one of my weapons. As you can see, they are kind of expensive-ish. 5 divine for 1 Fracturing Orb. And the way a Fracturing Orb works is it'll fracture a random modifier on your item. And that modifier can then never be changed, basically. It locks in one modifier to be permanent on the item no matter what you basically do to it. And the item that you try to fracture must have 4 modifiers, which is something I wasn't fully aware of in the beginning. But as you'll see here, my weapon, my one weapon that I crafted, has a fractured mod that is like a different, almost gold color in comparison to the blue lines of text underneath it. If I hold down Alt, you'll see the mana, the tier 1 mana. It's a different color. So if we go to our stash tab right here, you'll see I have multiple of these fractured items, which can be found just dropping on the ground, but you can also deterministically, the way I did it, I had 4 of these weapons all rolled with tier 1 mana and with tier 1 cast speed or something like that. And then it had like 2 other mods on there. And then I just fractured 4 of them to get this one, basically. Because it's a 1 in 4 or a 25% chance that you'll hit it. That doesn't mean that you can't go 8 in a row without hitting it. You can, or you can get 4 in a row hitting all 4 in a row. Or you can go 10 times without hitting anything. It happens, you know what I mean? Like, that's completely RNG. But once you have fractured an item, normally this would be looking like no. Normally it would be looking like boom. Can we maybe just use it here? Like this. All right. If I had just fractured this, this is what it would look like, right? It would be 4 mods and one of them would be fractured. Now let's say the 4 mods that are on here are super trash. I need something else, not global fish damage and totem life and increased bleeding. I don't need any of that shit. But I needed the cold res and the lightning res to be on my item. If we can make this item back to blue, now I can basically deterministically add a mod to it constantly, right? And once I get the mod that I want, let's say it was attack speed I needed, now it never changes the cold and lightning res. It doesn't matter. It'll never, no matter how many times I press the button, it'll never disappear. You cannot remove it. So that is a super good item, right? Because it forces a mod to be permanent on the item. In the case of my mana mod on this item, what is so great about that is then I use an essence. If you look on the mod underneath that says 92% increased spell damage, I used an essence on the item to craft it until I hit. So every time I'm pressing the essence, I get the high-end spell damage. I keep pressing it until I hit the one that has spell damage and mana on it, the multi-mod on there. And once I hit that, boom, now all of my prefixes are on. So it was very simple to get to. It did take quite a bit of currency to get there, but you're getting the gist of how the orb actually works, right? Again, this is a thing that you grind out with your Harbingers. This is just super easy to do, very convenient. Alright, so next up. Next up we should do, where are you? I'll take you. I need a unique item. So reforges a unique item or equipment as another of the same item class. So technically we could have a heavy belt. We could use of course not the mage blood. You would never do that on mage blood. You could use an agent of on a separate heavy belt that's in the same class. And then technically you would be able to get, let's say if it wasn't corrupted, we used it on this one just technically. We would be able to craft a mage blood by doing it like that. The way it works, it just automatically changes any unique into another unique of the same type. So if I'm using it on a ring, I'll keep changing it to a new ring over and over and over until I don't want to like change it no more, or until I hit the specific thing that I'm looking for. You know what I mean? And this is very convenient in when you're like starting out. It's also very convenient towards the end game, because if you have like a god-tier amount of these, you can technically just sit there and keep rolling until you hit something that you need out of whatever item it is you need. And it's super simple and it's very easy to use, and it's super smart. Like, I love the fact that you can change the unique items to whatever you want it to be. It's just very, very smart the way they made that. So that was the Ancient Orb. Next up we have the Binding Orb, which is another exceptionally useful orb. Let's see if I have an item I can use it on, though. No, it's a one-hander. What about in here? Doesn't really want to use it on that. Well, you can use it on this, I guess. So. Oh, is it? Ah, it has to be a normal, and that's a fractured item. That's not gonna work. Sorry, that's my bad. Has to be a normal item. Do I have a normal item that I'm trying to? That one don't matter. No. So if we had a white item, we use an orb of binding. As you'll see right now, this is a 3 socket and 3 linked item currently. We use this to upgrade a normal item into a rare item, so a yellow one. And on top of that, it will automatically link it and socket it. So it should turn into a 4 socket, 4 linked rare item. Boom. You saw that? It put the 4 links on, it put the 4 sockets on, and it's a rare item. This currency is exceptionally good in the beginning too. You happen to find one of these, it's GG. If you find one of these in like the first 2 acts, you're easily set up to get to Act 6 then. You know what I mean? Because now you have 4 links and it's going to make your skill gems way more powerful. So for the next one, we got a Engineering Orb. The way this works is a leak mechanic specific currency. So inside of your maps there'll be something called a strong box. It's also something you can spec into with your atlas tree. It's stuff you can add with your scarabs. It's one of those things that are just a feature, but once you have one of these boxes in your maps, and it's the type of box that you really want, you can then use these currencies to re-roll the box to what you want. Let's say it's a box that gives you these divination cards. You can then re-roll it so it gives you item cards, or it gives you currency cards, or it gives you more of like a specific type of cards, or a higher quantity of cards. And again, that's, you can use these items in here to re-roll it, but you can also use this Engineering Orb to improve the quality of the box, and you can then put 20 quality on, like we put 4 quality on the armor, you can put 20 quality on a box before you open it, and then in turn get 20% more efficient modifiers out of it. So next up is an Orb of Regret. The way an Orb of Regret works is you use one and you'll receive a passive skill tree respec point. So if we go to our passive skill tree right here, if I want to refund a passive point, I have to have refund points in order to do that. Those refund points comes from the Orb of Regret. So if I were to press refund, I could then refund this skill, and then I could put it, let's say I wanted to put it here instead, I could put it there instead. But if I didn't have the refund points, if I had 0 refund points, I would go here, would find an Orb of Regret, and I would just use them, and then I can respec my skill tree. There is this league, they have introduced a new way of doing that, of course. You can also respec your skills for gold. This is 29,000 gold to respec 1 point. So I highly suggest do not do that at all. It's just not worth it. Maybe very early on if it's super cheap, but I wouldn't do it. I just go with the regrets instead. You'll get a lot of these throughout your game. place, so don't be too worried about that. The Orb of Unmaking is another one that's really useful. You'll get more than you need of these two. You can also buy them from Keurig for 2 regret orbs. The way these work are, again, it allows you to respec your Atlas tree. So if I wanted to stop grinding my strong boxes, I could then refund. As it says, I have 72 refund points right now. I could refund all of my points here, and I could then add them into another mechanic that I rather want to play now. Let's say I start out by playing one mechanic because the build is more able to do that one mechanic than it is able to do a more juiced and harder mechanic. I'll start out doing that mechanic. I'll respec the skill tree or the Atlas tree into a different mechanic when my build becomes strong enough to where I can handle it. Now, the next one is called a Sacred Orb. A Sacred Orb is an orb used to reroll the base numbers of your base, right? So if we look at the evasion and energy shield rolls on this armor, it has 298 evasion rating, and it has 62 to energy shield. Next to those two numbers, there is a roll, which you can roll between. So it can roll between 286 and 329. Now, if we use a Sacred Orb on this item, it will basically change the roll on the evasion rating and energy shield. So let's try that. Boom, it went up by a little bit. It could have gone down, it could have gone up. It's super random, right? But now it's basically nearly perfect. So that was really, really worth it, but it's not always worth it if the item is not worth it. Like, if the item isn't good enough, you shouldn't be using this. Like, me using that on this specific item was a complete waste of that orb, right? Like, no point to it at all. Doesn't matter though, because I have already used it almost one year. Alright, so Blessed Orb. Now, this has multiple uses. Let's put this guy back in here. And we'll grab this. Yeah. The way the Blessed Orb works is you can re-roll an implicit, so the very top modifier that says Culbras. This orb allows me to re-roll that one modifier over and over until I hit the perfect one. So once I get the 30 cold breaths, I'm good. I don't need any more. I'm gonna stick with this, right? I personally thought that was the use for it, right? Re-roll any implicit modifier on any of your items into what you like it to be. It has, since then, it has occurred to me that there's other things that it can be used on. There is a mechanic called Expeditions, and in Expeditions, they have logbooks. Each logbook is kind of like a map. But, if we look at this one, you can see how it rolls 40 to 49 monster life, and it rolled 48. And with the Blessed Orb, we can then change those rolls, like with Divine Orbs, but on see, it doesn't work on a map. It only works on your Expedition logbooks, but you can then change the values on the rolls, and that way you can get way better rolls on your logbooks. It's very, very convenient. last but not least, we have the Veiled Orb. It's probably the most hard one to kind of explain because there's so many outcomes. It's very unpredicting. Like you don't know what's gonna happen when you use Available. Let me try. Let's take a couple rings, yeah? Actually, we'll take 5 just in case. Now, the way this works is kind of different from item to item. Some items have certain implicit roles that you can get from using Available. It can be used on a map too. But it can completely re-roll the map. Let's see if it happens here. It did. It re-rolled. No, it didn't. Okay. What about this one? I didn't. Okay. As you'll see now with the ring, though, that did not change. Nothing happened here. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Maybe this ring specifically can't. Never mind then, okay. Never mind. We'll just use one of our rings that are already corrupted. Never mind. I thought I could make it happen in front of you guys so you could see it happen. But we'll take one here. So this prismatic ring right here, I have a similar prismatic ring right next to it. Thieves Torment, Thieves Torment. But if you noticed, this one has 9 all resistant as the implicit. And this one has Grant's level 21 Pride skill. Corruption implicit modifier. So your Veil Orbs will corrupt an item. A corrupted item can roll a new implicit. Another thing that can happen is it can roll a white socket onto the item. That means that you could technically get a new implicit, you could get a white socket, you could get nothing, as we saw with the rings, or you could break the item into a rare item. So you could do it with a unique item. Let's try and see if we can. There we go. Boom. So we just brick this unique item, short bow, into a rare item. It's just still a short bow, but now it's not unique. It doesn't have any other unique modifiers. It doesn't have anything in common with the previous item. It just now bricked completely. It's not worth anything. It's terrible, basically, right? But you could be lucky that it rolled to something completely crazy, right? But it's so random that I wouldn't rely on rolling your rare item and getting a good item like that. With the corruptions, what you kind of want to use it for, though, is you want to definitely corrupt maps so you can get maps that have the maximum amount of modifiers. We go here. As you can see, all these maps are corrupted. No, not all of them are. Oh, that one is not. Not all of them are rolled super good, but this is like leftover maps that I gave that I didn't want to use. That it's for my map runners, basically. A good map would be 8 mods or something like that. I thought I had one sitting right there, but I didn't. You can just look at what a T17 map looks like. But it basically it would have like a ton of mods like this map. A bunch more of the quantity and all that stuff. Another way to use it is on an item that you actually need. So if we go to our, here we go. As you'll see, I'm currently using this one, but only because I don't have a minimum power charge. Since I don't have that ring, I didn't want to use this currently, but it is way better to use this Kitabes with the maximum power than it is with nothing, right? The maximum power charges gives you a more critical strike chance, so of course that's going to be way more useful than not having that specific mod on here, like I do on this one. Again, this is just me having a regular version of Kitava's Thirst. I have then used my Jeweler's Orb on it to get 4 sockets. I then used my Fusing to get 4 links. I then used my Chromatic to get 2 blue, 1 red, 1 green. And then when I've done that, I used my Armor Scrap to give it 20 quality. And then I used a Veil Orb on it to corrupt it, hoping it wouldn't break into a yellow or rare item, but hoping that it would gain a corrupted implicit. Most useful or best in slot corrupted implicit you could get on the Kitava's Thirst for this build that I'm currently rocking is the +1 to power charge. So I hit that right off the bat this league on my very first corruption, so I was like, oh, okay, so we don't need to think about that anymore. That's done, you know what I mean? Like I've literally just won the game. That's how I viewed it, and then I was like, okay, we go from there. Now, that's it for page 1, except for our chisels. So, for the next part, we're going to start out by talking about chisels. The way chisel works is some chisels, like this one, is normal and is the one that's going to be in the game forever, I think. I don't think they'll take this out. The other ones we'll talk about, they might take those out. We don't know yet. That's something they introduced this league and it's all new. But basically what it does, it improves the quality on the map. As you can see, it just gained 5 quality on that map. There is different enhanced versions of the chisel, which were introduced this league. This one gives you a divination card, increased quantity of divination card of quality. This gives you enhancing the currencies found in your map. So this one is fairly useful. Then you have one that enhances the pack size. This is exceptionally useful. This is really useful. And then you have one that enhances the quality, rarity of item replaced with quality. And then the last one is the...
Hello.
Wait, what is the last one? I am actually confused a little bit myself here. Oh, right, the scarabs. So it basically lets you find more scarabs. That's correct. I forgot about that one. I tend to sell these. I don't really use them. I use these a lot though, all the time. Then we have our Eater of World themed currency. That's not gonna make a whole lot of sense if you're super new, but basically there is these map device buttons. Each button represent a specific boss, and by pressing them you can force spawn, or like you can gain an invitation to one of those bosses. But for instance, choosing the blue one we just pressed also gives you a ton of these these ichors. And let's grab do I have a none? Yes, we have one right here. So as you can see, I have these implicits. It says one is from Eater of Worlds implicit and one is a Searing Extract implicit. The blue icon we just chose on our map device, that spawns an altar which can drop more of these. And the way they work is you can use them on any of your rare items in the armor slots. So helmet, gloves, armor and boots. And what happens, as you can see, it just turned my boots blue. It just added an implicit, and you can of course change it by pressing it again and again, and however you want to get the ones that you want. That one, the blue one is called Eater of Worlds, the red one is Searing Exarch, and as you can see, we can just add whatever we want. We figure out which one we want, and we keep adding in till we get the specific one that we want. For instance, on my boots, I want avoid alignment, and I want action speed to do everything faster. And if we go down on my boots suffixes, I have 30% avoid alignments, and then on my implicit, I have 20%, so that's 50%. And when you have the jewel that I'm currently working on using here, I have 50% from that jewel as well, and now I'm immune to alignments. Easy as that. And you just want to figure out which one or which type of implicits you're looking for. Of course, they come in different tiers. As you know, our mods and the items have different tiers. Tier 1 being the best, tier 10 being the worst, I believe. The way you should look at them is, this is a tier 3 or something like that. This is like tier 4, tier 5, tier 6, right? And then if you use this one on an item and you get like the exceptional mod on there, you can then use a Orb of Conflict, and that Orb of Conflict, which is super expensive too, is gonna upgrade to a higher than exceptional. You can get exquisite, or I think there's one above that too, if I remember correctly. I've never personally done that, but I know that that's what they're used for. Then we have our Beyond Demon currencies, which are currencies that can be used on any corrupted item, right? So most currencies cannot be used on a corrupted item. Once the item is corrupted, you no longer are able to use like a Chaos Orb on it. You can no longer use an Exalted. You can no longer use a Scouring Orb. I think everything is blocked except for tainted currencies. And the way tainted currencies work are very simple. It's basically just a similar version of a pre-existing item. So for instance, we have a tainted fusing orb. Now it's technically the same as a fusing orb. Like this one adds links between sockets. It can both add them or remove them. It's completely random. And the same happens with this one, but this one just only does one at a time. It can't go from one linked directly into a 6 link. It'll only go 1, 2, 3, 4, then back to 3, then up to 4, then back to, you know what I mean? Like that's how it'll go. So the way to use some of these are, you want to look up how to use them, because it's a little complicated, at least for the fusing ones. Of course, there's other ones. We have the jewelers, if you want to get sockets. You have armor scrap, same idea if you want quality on a corrupted item. We have the blacksmith. You want quality on a weapon that's corrupted, so on and so forth. Then we have our orbs, the influence orbs, and there is 6 different orbs that you can use for an influence onto an item, just like we put our implicits on the boots right here. You can then add a orb to an item to force spawn specific mods that wouldn't normally be available on the item, but since you influenced it with one of these orbs, now it's basically you're basically able to do a specific modifier. So for me personally, right now I'm using these Crusader orbs on a belt like this, because I want to get the increased maximum energy shield in percent. As you can see, it says prefix modifier Crusaders. So if I hadn't influenced, like this is not influenced, right? And this is, you can see it has like the electricity around it. And if you look at the name of the item, it has like a red icon in front of the name. Both of those indicate that it is a influenced item. And the way that it basically works is you have an influenced item, you can roll a specific modifier on it. You want to make sure first and foremost that the item can actually roll the modifiers and that the influence is the right influence to roll the right modifiers. This all comes out to, again, a crafting video, because this is not something that's super necessary to explain in depth, but just to kind of like touch on it. And of course there's different influences, each influence has a different outcome, and you can just keep rolling it until you find the exact modifiers you want from the specific influence. Alright, so next up we have the Eldritch currency, which is these three specific ones. As you'll see, it's a Chaos Orb, an Annulment Orb, and a Exalted Orb, which you might remember from here. Exalted, Chaos, and Annulment. They kind of have, it's a little bit of the same idea as the original currency, just slightly changed. So if we look at this one, we have these Eater of World and Searing Exarch currencies, and if the Searing Exarch is dominant on an item, it rerolls a prefix modifier. If the Eater of World is dominant on an item, it'll reroll a suffix modifier. So the way that kind of works is, if we have our boots here, that we have our implicit modifiers from the Eater of Worlds and from the implicit Exarch, sorry. As you'll see, both of them says lesser after it's a Searing Exarch implicit modifier, and then it's lesser, right? But that's because I used a lesser Eldritch Orb, Emperor, and a lesser Eldritch Ichor. I used those two, and it gave me lesser mods. But if I were to use a greater, a grand, or an exceptional, that would be the type of mod I would receive. So if we use an Eater of World and it's a greater, now we have one lesser and one greater mod on there. So if we go back to our Eldritch Chaos, it says when the Eater of World is dominant, that means that that is the highest modifier, implicit modifier I have on here. It will automatically re-roll a suffix. So if we look at our suffixes, currently our suffix is only fire res, right? Like that's the only suffix we have. So if I were to use this, it would automatically re-roll the fire resistance to something different. And if we look at the next one, we have the annulment, and this would automatically remove a modifier, being a prefix or a suffix, depending on which implicit mod is the dominant, which is the highest. So again, back to our four different types of orbs over here. Depending on which one of them is the dominant, in this case it's our Eater of World implicit modifier is the greater. So if we were to use the annulment, it would remove the fire res. So let's say we wanted to remove the fire res, that would be perfect, right? Because now we can guaranteed remove the fire res. Next up we have the Exalted. And the Exalted basically is the opposite of the annulment, so it'll just add a prefix or a suffix to an item, depending again on the implicit, which one is the more dominant version. Alright, last but not least, we have our juice. And the life force, aka the juice, is a crafting material. So we have our regular crafting bench, which is the icon you'll see down here on the minimap. Now, don't mind you, my crafting bench looks a little bit different because it's like a paid crafting bench from a supporter pack. We also have a different crafting bench called the Horty crafting, which uses these different types of juice, or also uses a crystallized life force, sacred life force. It's basically a specific item you get from fighting this boss inside of this mechanic, and she'll drop this. And as you'll see, if we go towards the bottom, it hits a point where it becomes fairly expensive. It's 12,000 of the purple or red juice, and one of these white ones here, in order to use this mod right here. So if I wanted to put this in here and I wanted to craft white mods onto this, or white sockets like I have on my weapon here, I would have to spend 12,500 plus one of these in order to try and roll a white socket on here. Of course, there's better ways of doing that. We'll get back to that. This is more useful if you have a armor that already has 3 or 4 white sockets on there and you want to try and add more ones, then this would be useful. If you have a weapon with 3 sockets, I would use a omen of blanching and then a chromatic orb to try and get the 3 white sockets like I got here. But it can also be used for other types of things. For instance, you can craft with this, let's say we can reforge a rare item, we can make it into a new item with a modifier that includes a fire modifier, or like a cold or physical life, whatever we need. We can also change, let's say we didn't need fire resistance on him, we needed cold resistance, then we can change our fire resistance into a cold resistant of the same exact modifier. So since this is tier 1, we get to keep a tier 1 modifier on there. So that's what the juice basically is. This is what you get right here. It says you can hold 50k, but that's 50k in one stack like this. In here you can have way more than 50,000. I am not entirely sure how many, if it's a million or however much you can have in here, but you can have a lot of this juice in here. But yeah, that is basically it for the currencies, the currency tab, the way they work, the basics of how they work, and I really hope this helped out. This is going to be a part of the complete and ultimate guide, so hopefully you guys liked it. If I made some mistakes on the way, please note me in the comments so I can fix that before I put it in the guide. And then let's